What up, Terry Warfield? Hope you're having a good day so far, man. If this is your first time on my channel, a big fat welcome to you. And if you're part of the fam, you're part of the squad, and you came back, drop a hashtag up in here, just so I know you're up in the comments. Now, you know we got to do a quick check. We got to do a quick family check to see where we at. So I got the YouTube Studio app open already on the Galaxy Fold. And right now we're at 8,394 subscribers, man. That's almost 8.4 thousand of us in the family. So I appreciate each and every one of y'all. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes, man. I know why you're here. You want to know, should you get the Sigma 16mm or should you get the Sony 24mm G Master? Yeah, I'm talking about that $1,500 lens that I just made a video on. Make sure you go watch that after this video. I'll put the link in the comments too. But $1,500 versus $400. Terry, that's a stupid comparison, isn't it? Well, if that's the case, then why were y'all in the comments on that video saying, should you get the 16mm or the 24mm G Master? Now, you probably wonder why we even need this comparison. I'm about to give you some technical stuff that we got to get out the way before getting into the comparison to shut the haters up in the comments. And also, it's knowledge that you may not know. Have a seat because it's about to get real. All right, the Sigma 16mm f1.4 is indeed a 16mm f1.4. And it is a crop sensor lens, meaning it's meant to go on cameras that have smaller sensors in them. Can it go on a full frame Sony camera? Sure, but there's some limitations. So the reason that I'm saying that is because a 16mm is a 16mm. A 24mm, like we're filming on right now, G Master, is 24mm. However, the 24mm G Master is meant to go on a full frame. Now, there's some conversions that we got to know about. 16mm might be 16mm, but when we're not putting it on a full frame sensor, we got to use a crop factor. We got to use a crop factor when we want to compare it to its full frame equivalent. So a 16mm f1.4 on a smaller sensor camera like this, or even if we were to put our A7 III into crop mode, effectively is a 24mm f2 equivalent. How did I get to that number? Well, the Sony crop factor is 1.5. So what we got to do is take 16mm, which is our focal length, times our crop factor of 1.5. That gives us 24mm. We also got to multiply the aperture, which a lot of y'all don't do. Everybody be like, oh my God, full frame gives you better background blur, XYZ. Well, did you know on a crop sensor, we can still get the same type of depth of field if we know how to utilize our crop factor. So if we multiply our minimum aperture of f1.4 times the Sony crop factor f1.5, that puts us around f2. Well, guess what we're filming on? The 24mm full frame lens that we can stop down to f2 if we need it. So effectively, we almost have an apples to apples comparison that we can achieve on both lenses. Now, I got to throw a few more things out there. If we were to put the G Master lens on a crop sensor or put the G Master lens in crop mode on our Sony, then it becomes about a 35mm. Then you will multiply the same thing. On the G Master, you take the aperture times the Sony crop factor. That's how you would get your effective minimum aperture. I bet you didn't know that. Well, now you know. So why are we doing this? Because one is $400, the other is $1,500, and arguably you can get the same type of composition out of both cameras. You can get it at 24mm f2 on both cameras, which should look exactly the same. I mean, of course they'll be different because the lenses are different, so one might have a different color cast, one might be sharper, XYZ, but you get what I'm saying. Now, the next thing we need to get into real quick before we get into the comparisons, I told you I was gonna be a lot of talking, is what are you getting for 5 times the price going from Sigma to G Master? Number one, it's a native Sony lens. Usually going native is the best route, is designed for your camera system. Number two, with the G Master, you are getting a aperture switch on the outside to declick the aperture ring, which the Sigma does not have. You're also getting an autofocus manual focus switch on the G Master, not on the Sigma. You're also getting a customizable button on the side of the G Master. You ain't getting that on the Sigma. You're getting weather sealing on the G Master, which you ain't getting on the Sigma. The build quality is also better on the G Master. Lastly, the G Master at f1.4 is just as sharp when it comes to the corners as this lens is stopped down to like f2.8 or f3.5. So the Sony obviously has the advantage in sharpness or overall image quality. However, you might not be able to tell the difference unless you are pixel peeping like a creep. So let's go ahead and get into some comparisons. And I think what you'll see is there really ain't that much difference to the average person's eyes. Now anyways, I know we're not the average person, but let me go ahead and throw these examples up here, then we'll finish talking about it after. Alright man, so I gotta say this to shut the haters up. Obviously the Sony G Master is the superior lens. It's a G Master. It's a professional lens meant for people who want the best that Sony has to offer. So yeah, obviously it's gonna be better than the Sigma in every single way. It's sharper, it's gonna handle chromatic aberration way better, flaring, ghosting, all of that stuff. The Sony is gonna do way better. I'm not trying to compare the two to say which one is better. I'm trying to make the comparison simpler for people who might already have a 16mm and are thinking about getting a G Master, or maybe thinking about getting either one or the other. Now that we got that out the way, what you'll see in these photos. At 24mm f1.4, the background is slightly creamier than each lens at f2, which is to be expected, right? f1.4 versus f2, the f1.4, the depth of field is going to be more shallow. Now, is it a big difference? To me, it's not a huge difference, but to some people, it might be. That's something that you got to decide if it's worth considering when it comes to these two lenses. Now, what I will say is the Sony is considerably sharper. We're about to look at some dog photos coming up, and you can see the Sigma versus the Sony. I'm gonna punch into the hair real quick. Just see how much sharper the Sony is. It's kind of crazy, and you may not be able to see it that well on your screen that you're looking at, but trust me, the Sony is sharp as hell compared to the Sigma, and the Sigma is no slouch. Alright, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a little vlog test for you. So right now I got the Sony mounted up on the A7 III and it's wide open at f1.4. So remember how this looks, and then we're gonna move it to f2, and then after that we're gonna put the 16mm on here, the one made by Sigma, and we're gonna have that open at f1.4. But the reason why we're doing f2 on the Sony is, remember, the Sigma wide open on the crop sensor body is gonna be an f2 equivalent. Then we'll put them all on the screen and see if you could tell the difference and if it's worth spending all that extra money. Let's do it. Okay, so now that the comparisons are out the way, this is what you probably saw. The same thing I saw. When it comes to composition, meaning the focal length and the amount of background blur, what you should have saw is they are freaking neck and neck. The Sony is much sharper, I will say that, but that doesn't mean that the Sigma is a slouch, because this lens is crazy sharp also. But anyways, it's really hard to spot the difference unless you're looking at them side by side. If you show somebody a picture of that Sigma 16mm, they will be like, oh my god, that lens is freaking sharp, until they put it next to the G Master. Now, is it worth the extra money? Questions you got to ask yourself. Question number one, do you want those benefits that we talked about earlier in this video that the G Master offers? Number two, after seeing those side-by-side examples, is the image quality difference enough for you to justify spending 5 times the amount of money? Now, one thing I forgot to throw out there, if we put this lens on the Sony in crop mode, we are going to lose megapixels. We're going to go from 24 megapixels to 10 megapixels. Now, is that a big deal? Not really. 10 megapixels is still more than enough data. In fact, I did a whole video on using the Sony A7 III with a cropped 16mm. That link is in the description also, but just know on the A7 III, you are losing megapixels. Now, if you got like an A7R III or an A7R4, where you get those higher megapixel counts, then your crop mode is gonna be like around 18 megapixels or 20 or whatever. I don't know those official numbers. However, it's not as much of a blow if you have one of the higher megapixel brothers, because even in crop modes, you are getting way more data. So that's something that you gotta consider. Lastly, you gotta think about what camera are you mounting it on. If you're mounting the G Master on an A7 III, you're getting 24mm. However, if you have a crop sensor camera and you're thinking about the 24mm G Master, remember on a crop sensor, if I put this 24mm lens on there, I'm getting about a 35mm equivalent. So with that being said, do you want a 35 or do you want something wider? Because if you want something wider, you need to go with a wider lens than a 24mm. So I know it's getting crazy, right? But anyways, now that that scientific crap is out the way, let me know what you think after looking at the samples. Do you think the 16mm is enough, or is the G Master worth 5 times the money? I will put an affiliate link to both lenses down in the description, and I appreciate y'all using my affiliate links, by the way. You know, keep the lights on, feast the babies and all that, and I'm very curious to know your thoughts. So make sure you comment below and then like before you leave off this video. Hey man, that's all I got for you. It's getting late, so peace and chicken grease. I'm out. Terry Warfield. Peace!